Hi, I'm Rob and welcome to Workshop 4F. This is a nutrition workshop where we're going to be covering some of the main macronutrients that we eat, such as protein and carbohydrates and fat, as well as discussing vitamins, minerals and electrolytes. So carbohydrates are really important for an athlete is because they provide the vast majority of energy for your cells in your body. So when we look at carbohydrates, we know that carbohydrates are broken down into simple sugars. Simple sugars are then absorbed into the bloodstream, and then from the bloodstream they get into the cells and where they're metabolized and used for energy. So if we know that carbohydrates is like one of our most important energy currencies in our body, it makes sense that we want to fuel our bodies up with carbohydrates prior to exercise. So typically if you're going to be eating carbohydrates prior to training, you want something that's rapidly digestible and easily absorbable, because we don't want your body spending unnecessary energy trying to digest a heavy carbohydrate heavy meal. We want something that's quick and effective. So I love to use bananas, piece of fruit, something like that, something that's rapidly absorbable and digestible, easy to chew, easy to break down. Piece of fruit is fantastic. You know, a banana has typically 20 to 30 grams of carbohydrates, which should be enough to get you through, sort of 45 minutes worth of exercise. So that's what I'd be looking at there. Carbohydrate needs post-workout. That really depends on the type of workout that you've had. So if you've had a really long, hard, grueling workout, it's been an hour or longer, it's been high intensity, you burn a lot of energy, you're obviously going to need more carbohydrates prior to your next exercise session. However, if you had a really light, simple session, it might be a recovery session or a stretching session or a yoga or something like that, you might not even need any carbohydrates after your exercise session. So carbohydrate intake should be taken into account what type of training that you did. Obviously, the harder and heavier your exercise session was, then the more carbohydrates you would need. In a post-workout carbohydrate meal, I'd be looking at a mixture of some fast digesting and some slower digesting carbohydrates, so you can keep the muscles fed for quite a few hours post-workout. So some good examples of this could be rice, either white rice or brown rice, perhaps some potatoes or a little bit of pasta can help as well. You want something that's a little bit slower absorbing. You don't want to go for the straight sugar because you want to make sure the muscles are replenished for quite a few hours post your workout. The carbohydrates that I would recommend that athletes avoid are typically the ones that come from processed foods. So when we're looking at fatty fried foods, we're looking at hamburgers and takeaways and stuff like that, because those carbohydrates also come with a lot of different types of polyunsaturated fats and saturated fats and trans fats. The combination of carbohydrates and fats at the same time in your bloodstream is not great. If you're eating a lot of calories and a lot of carbohydrates at the same time, there's a good chance your body's going to store a lot of those carbohydrates as body fat. So I would avoid a lot of carbohydrates that are coming from processed food, and I would try and keep my carbohydrate sources to clean, simple, natural things that are found in nature. So fruits and vegetables, some healthy whole grains, potatoes and things like that are your best bet. So if you are an elite athlete and if you're training heavy, you've got a large volume of training, go ahead and have carbohydrates at every meal. It is important that you keep those muscle carbohydrate stores stocked up. You don't need to have stacks and tons of carbohydrates at every meal, but a small amount should do you good. If you're training multiple sessions during a day, if you're doing 2 a day or 3 a day sessions, you definitely need a lot more carbohydrates. You need to make sure that your muscle glycogen, the sugar levels in your muscles, are completely replenished from one training session to the next. So if you've done a hard hour in the morning, you've got another hard hour in the afternoon, you want to make sure that the 1 to 2 meals you have in between are very carb heavy so that you can restore that glycogen in your muscles. So the role of protein in nutrition is really important, and from an elite athlete view, it's essential for muscle repair and for muscle recovery. So protein breaks down to something called amino acids, and those amino acids are essentially the building blocks of muscle cells. So when we process protein, when we eat protein, those amino acids go into our muscle cells and help us to repair and replenish those muscles. Particularly if we're doing heavy periods of weight training or resistance training, your protein needs may also increase. Okay. In terms of when to time your protein, I would recommend having protein in most meals. The only meal that I might not have a lot of protein in would be the meal right before the workout. You want to stick to carbohydrate sources there, but you would definitely want to have some protein in your meal post-workout and also some protein in the meals after that. You don't need to eat huge amounts of protein. There's a very common misconception that the body needs large amounts of protein. I would be looking at no more than 2 grams per kilogram of body weight in protein per day, and how you want to break that up is up to you. You can have 3 or 4 meals that have maybe 30 grams of protein in each, so omelets and yogurt in the morning. You might have some lean protein at lunchtime, or a salad or something like that. You might have a protein shake after a workout, and you might have another piece of protein at dinner time, and then you've got all your bases covered. We definitely don't need to go overboard with protein, but we do make sure that we have enough to support our training efforts. Protein shakes can be very useful if you are finding it hard to get enough protein over the course of a day, and if you're busy and if you can't, for example, eat protein out of a regular meal. I always recommend using real sources of protein before going to powders. So if you can get some lean protein in through meats or yogurt or eggs or something like that, I would prefer it that way. But if it's post-workout, you're busy, you're traveling, you need something quick, then a protein shake is fine. I wouldn't go overboard with them. Try not to make them a mainstay of your system or of your program, but maybe one a day will work well for you. In terms of timing your protein after a workout, there's been a lot of new research that's come out that says it doesn't really matter if we get the protein within that old 20 to 30 minute sort of window post-workout. As long as you're getting your protein in over the course of a day, as long as you're completely replenishing the muscle protein levels in a 24-hour period, you should be okay. It is a good idea for a habit to have a protein shake after a workout, because you know that you are getting protein into your system and you're not going to skip or miss a meal. But in saying that, it's not an absolute be-all. It doesn't need to be within the first 30 minutes anymore. So the role of fats in a diet for an athlete have been long misunderstood. Back in the 80s and 90s, there was a big high-carb, low-fat push for athletes, knowing that the carbohydrates was a really important fuel source, and it is, but fats play a very vital role in the body as well. Fats are very calorie dense, so fats have 9 calories per gram, as opposed to protein and carbohydrates that just have 4 calories per gram. So if you are trying to put on weight, if you're trying to increase your calorie intake to support your training efforts, having a few meals that are a bit higher in fat can be a good idea. Fat is also really important for your nervous system, it's important for your hormonal system, it's important to recover after exercise, as long as you're eating the right types of fats. So what we should be really focusing on are the healthier forms of saturated fats, as well as mono and polyunsaturated fats, and definitely avoiding trans fats. So trans fats are the things that are found in cakes and lollies and pies and pastries. All that stuff is definitely terrible for you and should be avoided. Focusing on healthy fats coming from whole plant sources like avocados, nuts, salmon, fatty cuts of high quality grass-fed beef, for example, they're your best sources. They're the ones that are going to be the best digested and absorbed by the body and give you the biggest bang for your buck. Ketosis is a very interesting diet that's popped up over the last probably 12 to 24 months. I'm loath to prescribe it. A, it's kind of outside my scope, but B, in regards to elite athletes, as ketosis requires a very constant, dedicated focus to eating extremely low carbohydrate, and there's also takes a period of time for you to adapt to the diet. So if you're not eating a very strict ketosis diet, what's happening is you're just eating a low carb diet and you're not getting enough fuel for your body. If you are eating a strictly ketosis diet, which means you're eating, say, less than 30 grams of carbohydrates a day, be prepared for 2 to 3 weeks of feeling pretty ordinary before you start feeling good again. So if you're willing to put up with being very, very, very strict on the diet, and going through the first 2 to 3 weeks when your body's trying to adapt from using carbohydrates as fuel, using fat as fuel, it might be for you, but I'd also consult a dietitian or a nutritionist before making any recommendations on that. Intermittent fasting can be a really, really good tool for some people in regards to keeping calorie intake low. So you might have an athlete that's trying to lose weight, and if we can compress your eating window to where you might be skipping breakfast and only eating over a course of, say, 6 to 8 hours, then that might be a good process for you, because you're generally going to eat less calories. However, on the flip side, for elite athletes, if you are high volume training, high frequency training, 2 or 3 sessions a day. We want to make sure that you're fueled quite constantly throughout the day. So you might still do an intermittent fast, but your window might be a little bit bigger. To give you an example of some windows, you might, for example, do a 12 hours on, 12 hours off, which means you might eat from 7 o'clock in the morning till 7 p.m. at night, and then you might stop eating. Whereas someone who trains a little bit less frequently might, say, skip breakfast, have their first meal at lunch, and then eat from lunch to dinner. Again, asking a dietitian or nutritionist if this is the right program for you, but just be mindful, again, if you are a high volume, high intensity, high frequency athlete, you might need to be fueled a little bit more frequently than intermittent fasting allows. A lot of athletes run into the problem of eating in season versus eating off season, and what they fail to understand is that the amount of calories that they're burning through all their training and playing over the course of a season allows them to get away with eating a lot more. When they go to off season, the amount of physical activity slows down, but they keep eating the same, and that's why you turn up to pre-season training 10 kilos overweight and you're struggling to lose it all. So you've got to understand that your caloric demands, the amount of food that you eat, has to match the volume and frequency and intensity of the exercise that you're doing. When you're in heavy training loads, you're going to be able to get away with eating a lot more. When you're taking weeks off, when you're in the off season, when you're not training as much, you're not in the gym, you've got to bring those calories down. You've got to give your body a little bit of a break from handling and processing thousands and thousands of calories of food. So make sure you understand that. Your calorie intake comes up with exercise and it goes down with rest. The role of fluid and electrolytes for elite athletes are really important. We understand how important it is to stay hydrated. Every cell is comprised mainly of water. We need water, it's a no-brainer. So 2 to 3 litres of water per day is a baseline for most people, and that's going to change depending on environmental demands. Hot, humid environments, you're going to need to drink a little bit more, especially if you're exercising outdoors a lot. With that, it's important to understand that when we sweat, not only are we just losing water, but we're losing really important minerals: sodium, potassium, chloride, magnesium. So we want to be trying to replenish some of those lost minerals in our sweat. So that's why having electrolyte fluid replacement drinks can be useful as well. Just keep in mind, if all you're doing is drinking Gatorade, don't be surprised if you put on 10 kilos over the course of a season. Making sure that the increase in the amount of calories you're drinking through Gatorade or Powerade is being managed by the amount of training that you're doing. One of my favorite things that I like to do is to mix up 1 to 2 litres of water with some powdered electrolytes and maybe some BCAAs, which is a form of amino acid that helps with protein synthesis and muscle sparing. So I might drink that during a workout so that I know that not only am I getting in water, I'm getting in some amino acids, and I'm also getting in some electrolytes as well. Vitamins play a really important role in the body. The body has a number of both water-soluble and fat-soluble vitamins that go through a range of different processes within the body, and you can research in your course notes regarding that. A lot of the vitamin intakes from vitamins A, B, C and D, etc. are set by national guidelines. We call them the recommended dietary intakes. What you need to understand as an elite athlete is that your recommended daily intakes or dietary intakes might need to be a little bit higher of those. So some really good examples might be vitamin C. So vitamin C is a very important and powerful antioxidant, but it's also a really important recovery vitamin. So you might need a little bit more vitamin C than what the RDI recommends. Another important one is magnesium. Magnesium is important for muscle relaxation. It helps to avoid cramps. It's an important nervous system conductor, and for most people, recommended daily intakes of magnesium are very low, so you might need a higher amount of magnesium as well. You can get vitamins ideally from whole foods, so spending most of your time eating a wide variety of foods will get all your vitamins. However, if you're really struggling, if you have a very narrow amount of types of food that you eat, you might look into a multivitamin or mineral supplement, or even something like a greens powder, which can cover all your bases.